So in this lab, I wanted to study how the effects of light stimulus affects how far a worm might travel from a specific point. So this over here is the setup of the lab. So I had the light over the X where I put the worm, and I put the little box around the cardboard so the worm would only want to travel in one direction, away from the light. And so here is the box with the light on, and I wanted to test to see how it would work. I just want to note one change that I made to my data table. I added 5 minutes to both of the trials, so just because I overestimated how fast a worm would travel. So the first trial I did was the max light intensity trial, and I started by putting the worm on the X that I made over the box earlier. After the first 5 minutes of the light being turned on, the worm traveled a total of 3 centimeters away from the origin. After a total of 10 minutes, the worm traveled about 6 centimeters away from the origin. After 15 minutes, the worm traveled about 7 centimeters away from the origin. And in the last 5 minutes, the worm didn't move at all. Some qualitative observations that I made was that when the worm moved, it expanded and moved in a long striding fashion, kind of like in a domino effect where the top moved first and then the movement traveled through the whole body. And then I also observed that the worm would move a couple of centimeters and then it would stop for a period, and then it would move again, and then it would stop, and then it would move again and then stop throughout the 20 minutes. For the second trial, there was no light shown on the worm. Throughout all of the testing periods, I noticed that the worm did not move away from the X. A total of 0 centimeters were traveled away from the starting position. This was the worm at 5 minutes. This was the worm at 10 minutes. This was the worm at 15 minutes. And lastly, this was the worm at 20 minutes. So some qualitative observations that I made was that the worm would sometimes move its head around, but no actual distance was traveled. And when the worm moved a little bit, it wasn't in such a long striding fashion compared to when the light was shown on the worm. So to conclude, the study shows that when an intense light as a form of stimuli is shown onto the worm, it will move away from the light source in a type of survival mechanism.